ourselves as having power, to be a part of the change of the process. I think the most valuable thing I've done as far as documentary is a documentary and a manuscript entitled Remembering Kearney Town. Remembering Kearney Town. And it's all about the importance of spaces, naming spaces, and claiming spaces.
Mm.
Kearney Town was a community where my great grandfather owned a lot of property,
Bill,
over
can I
100 acres.
a quick question on that?
Uh-huh.
Is that Kearney Town one of the links in your bio?
Yes, it's number 4.
Okay, good.
And the value of that is to illustrate that within every community, at least 2 or 3, if not more, histories. And usually, the person who has, the people who really document the history are people who are in power. So Kearney Town was the area I speak of was known as Kearney Town to the black community, but to the white community is known as Limer Town. So this manuscript and video that we did was talking about the importance of us writing our history, claiming our spaces, and memorializing our history. Otherwise, it gets lost. So the gist of it is that in every community, there are many different stories, but oftentimes the dominant culture gets to dictate what the story is going to be. So as a researcher working in my community, my hope is to help my community tell our story, own our story. And when you know your history, when you know where you come from, it empowers you and gives you momentum to push forward into the future. So again, as we see that, we see in a lot of statues are being torn down that have memorialized things that have been counter to what we say is this nation, that we the people. And but we need to realize that anytime there's a community or a road or a street or a building named for an individual or an organization, it's memorializing that particular person or organization. And so that's the gist of what I do. At the university, the Center for Health and Motion Disease Prevention, where I worked, we work across the state in low-income communities, working with communities, making healthy foods more accessible, physical activity more accessible, and also challenging systems that have oppressed or marginalized populations, and try and bring down those barriers.
Could you give us a few examples of the kinds of systems you're talking about, Bill?
All right. Well, again, Warren County was known historically as one of the wealthiest counties that was based on agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
But over the years, many of the small farmers weren't granted opportunities for loans and supports from USDA, and so eventually lost their farms. So Warren County, as rural as we are, there aren't too many people growing their own foods, and we're known as a food desert.
Mm-hmm.
We're losing our supermarkets because of these discount stores coming in that don't sell healthy produce; they sell processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
So it's put us in a quandary where supermarkets can't really compete for the SNAP dollars that are coming to our county. So we've only got 2 supermarkets in Warren County. One is like 4 miles from downtown Warrington. And the other supermarket is like 13 miles away, which is on the lake. And the lake is sort of like a resort area of the county. So we got people living in Warren County who can't access healthy foods.
Mm-hmm.
And many of those people are eating out of those discount stores, processed foods, which just adds to the health dilemma. So what we are doing in Warren County and some other counties across the state, we are supporting community gardens. In Warren County, we've got a community garden at the senior center for senior citizens. We got one at a local church, at a mobile home park, one at apartment complex for disabled and elderly, and one at Soul City. Now, Soul City was a city planned by Floyd McKissick back in 1969. and I might have it on my list, and that never came into fruition, but we have a partnership with them. We have a community garden there.
Now,
So for
he was a leader in the civil rights movement, right?
right, right, he was definitely a civil rights advocate, and so Soul City is definitely here in Warren County. We're working around furthering that vision. So some of the projects we're doing are the community gardens where we provide support to pay garden managers and provide seeds and fertilizer and other resources to support the garden.
Hmm.
Also, something else that we're doing through my work is in Warren County, I serve on our local food policy council that as we reestablish our local food system, that the marginalized population who historically has been left out of opportunities, that their voice will be heard on the council. So we'll be serving not just the specialty crops or large farmers, but we also be serving and elevating the voice of those people who are on SNAP benefits or are
Hmm.
living in food deserts, so that when we reestablish the food system, everybody will have access to healthy foods, and also those who desire to can participate in processing or developing or growing our foods in Warren County. And that means that we have to give extra support to people who've been historically uh, isolated or marginalized or limited to access to resources.
Can you tell us a little bit about what a food council is and what your primary roles are?
Okay, a food council is usually you try and get everybody in the community connected to food one way or another. You got consumers, you got producers, you got packagers, you got transport systems, you got people who can't access healthy foods who may be living eating foods from the local food pantry. So, Food Council is a collective of people that represents the cross section, a sector of the community. On our Food Policy Council, we got the Economic Development Director, we got people from the Department of Social Services, uh, even from local government. So it's a collective of cross sector of the community to have input about whatever issues or opportunities you're pursuing relative to food.
Hmm.
And so our work goes from organizing community forums to discuss the possibility of attracting full-term supermarkets in our county, to discussing enhancing our local food market, our local farmers market, to
Hmm.
make it sustainable. Also about how do we support marginalized communities by providing transportation to get to the supermarkets that aren't convenient. So I think a local food policy council is an instrument that could help enhance uh, food access, economic opportunities, even as far as environmental issues around healthy environments to support farming.
Hmm. That sounds fantastic. I know that the state is trying really hard to create food councils in each of our 100 counties. I don't know how successful they've been, but I've heard a lot about the Warren County one and all of your leadership, and a lot of folks tend to be looking to you for a lot of the cool things that are happening.
Yeah, well, we're connected to that state effort, and I've got to give some kudos to Community Food Strategies
Oh
that
yeah.
has really been instrumental in helping us move the needle because for several years we were just floundering, but
Hmm.
with their facilitation, we helped structure ourselves
Who
to
are you working with at Community Food Strategies? Do you have a particular person that you work with?
uh, Jenny and Piner, Abby,
Abby, yeah, right, yeah,
Jenny
yeah.
Knight and Abby Piner. Yes. So,
Great resource.
and I find myself in my work, I call myself a stem cell. A stem cell is a cell that can be formed into anything you need. So I'm busy always with making new connections and trying to bring in new partners because I believe the solution to our big problem we will need a cross-sector approach, you know.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a little bit about environmental issues, and you specifically within the context of farming practices and so forth. But I wonder if you could share a little bit about the whole Warren County struggle with environmental justice and some of the history behind the PCBs and all the things that have gone on there over the last 30 or 40 years.
Okay.
I know it's a big can to open.
Well, again, I was born and raised in Warren County, but during the period that we were dumped on, I was living in Maryland. It was after I came back to Warrenton, I began to be involved to help tell the story. But
Mhm.
what happened in the late 70s, 1978, I believe, a company in Raleigh hired a father and son business to dispose of some lubricants, contaminants, the polychlorinated biphenol. And they employed this father son company to dispose of these toxins. And what the father and son did, they took all these toxins and they rode along roadway around the county surrounding Warren County, not in Warren County, dumping, spraying these contaminants along the roadway. My understanding of like 246 miles worth of contaminants
That much.
poured along the roadways. And so it happened, it lay there for a year or two before people realized what was really happening. And the grass and the shrubbery began to die. And after doing an assessment, they realized that they were contaminants. And eventually, this father and son went to jail behind this. But in the meanwhile, Governor Hunt was looking for a place to dump these soils. And out of 5 possible locations across the state, Warren County was selected as this place to site the dump. Um, there were, I think, 400 tons of soils that were brought into the Afton community about 2 miles from Coldey Springs Baptist Church in the community known as Kearney Town
Mm.
that I spoke about earlier. So they purchased over 600 acres of land right adjacent to my grandfather's land, where they sited the Warren County PCB landfill.
Mm.
What happened was many of the local people gathered together to protest uh, the dumping, which happened. The landfill was sited in 1982. So the protest took place in September 1982, where many of our citizens from our community, church, and family uh, laid in the roadway, blocked the traffic to resist the landfill. Initially, the landfill was planned to be like over 600 acres, but because of the protest, it was reduced to 142 acres. But we did receive the landfill. We were told by the state and others that it was a safe site, but within weeks there was leakage in the landfill. And so between 1982 and 2003, there were many court battles and fights about remediating the site. And so in 2003, Jim Hunt, who had in his second term appropriated $18 million to clean up the site in Warren County. But there's still suspicions that there were health issues, environmental issues, as a result of the contaminants in the ground. And there was no real health tracking of the health issues around the landfill. So for 20 years, between 1982 and 2002, 2003, the toxins were in the soil, in the ground, but no one was really tracking how how much it impacted the environment and the health.
Mm.
So even with the remediation of the site, there's still suspicion in our community that there have been health issues, cancers and soft tissue issues as a result of the toxins being in our system.
Mhm.
But it's tough to trace it back to the landfill. So there's still questions. But back in 2011, I was doing research with our community churches around community gardens. And at our church, which is about 2 miles from the landfill, we were growing a community garden. And someone asked, is the food we're growing safe because we don't know if it's contaminated by the pollutants? And at that time is when I began to focus on environmental justice, uh, history, and legacy. And my research partner and I pursued a grant from USDA to do a
Mhm.
little more digging into what people felt about the environment and their safety. Didn't get the grant, but I coordinated the Warren County Environmental Action Team, which is like #1 on my bio, a Facebook
Mhm.
page. That since 2012, I've been posting environmental related um, issues and opportunities and all the things on my Facebook page. So I invite you to go and visit that. It's sort of like long in detail, but I pretty much tell our story in pictures. So
And
since 20,
that is posted on the Blackboard site to all the students, the Facebook link.
yeah, so since 2012, that's what I've been doing, and I'm working with the university, but I'm also working for a company called AFG, and AFG, we are working now to build solar greenhouses on property that's owned by our church association, United Shiloh. And already began to move soil. So hopefully next year, by this time, we'll have our solar greenhouses up, producing
Wow, that's exciting.
organic. So my hope is that I can help my community tell our story and build our future.
Hmm.
Take something that was negative and turn around to be a positive. So hopefully, some of you who are on this call, when you're traveling through Warren County in a year or so, you can stop by and visit our solar greenhouses and look at a county that's been labeled poor and marginalized, and now is on the cutting edge environmental friendly practices. Um, I know I'm all over the page, but my work takes me all over the page.
Can you say a little bit more about your self title of social entrepreneur?
Social entrepreneur. Social entrepreneur for me is maybe you don't create the item, but you learn how to use things in a different way and how to think differently. And when I first moved back to my Warren County, I think a lot of people in my county have been socially engineered because they always talk so negative about Warren County. Oh, nothing ever happens here. They'll
Hmm.
never change. And my hope is through us telling our stories, document our history, my people in my community will see that awesome things that happen in Warren County. Just everyday people have
Yep.
brought about major changes. So I think that's like I'd like to be able to bring this hope, I can attitude to people who have been marginalized and taken
Yep.
on what people had said about them.
Hmm.
And so social entrepreneuring to me means that you're addressing social issues using every means you can. And I use research, I use data, I use stories, and I use history to try and educate people that we can be a part of the change. We have a voice, we have skills, but we have to stop looking at our deficits, but look at our assets and use our assets.
Hmm. That's beautiful. Wow. I have a couple of other questions that I want to get to, but I also want to see if there are any questions from our students. So I'd like to just open up the floor. I noticed somebody had their hand up a minute ago from the little raise hand icon down below there. Would anybody like to ask Bill a question about what he's talked about so far?
Yes, I wanted to know what this AFG stands for.
Oh, um, AFG, that's the acronym of the owner of the company.
Okay. That's like his name, like
Yeah,
Alan Fred Green or something.
yeah, for the owners. I will have to get back with you on that.
So this is someone who has this person like invented these solar greenhouses? Or are they the ones that are installing them, or how's that working?
Okay, well, the owners collective have done solar panels across
Uh,
the country
ah,
from California, usually on top of parking garages or stadiums.
mhm.
And how we were introduced to the company is that our church association, United Shiloh, has owned 100 acres, I mean, 50 acres of land for 100 years, which is in Warren County.
Mm.
And about 7, 8 years ago, we were considering what do we do with this land? Should we rent it to some solar energy company to do a solar farm? And we attempted to do that, but it didn't work out too well. So we realized that one of our trustees in one of our church member churches was a venture capitalist, and he was part of AFG. And he says, "Well, you know what? Let me work with you, and maybe can be creative and work." Long story short, to build solar greenhouses to provide uh, organic fruits and vegetables to supermarkets and other places, especially shops.
Man, I love that.
And so it took, it's taken us about 4 or 5 years to get to where we are because it's a black-owned company, and somehow we had to jump through extra hurdles. But by
That's,
the grace of God, we finally got all our certifications, and we're now at a place where investors are now interested in working with us
mm.
to grow produce for some well-known restaurants.
Oh, that's so.
Because because after the pandemic and the breakdown in the food systems, many of the companies now who were getting produce from Mexico and elsewhere around the globe see the need now to source their produce here in the
Yeah,
USA.
yeah.
Also, much of our produce and fruit comes from California, and now markets and supermarkets are looking for producers on the East Coast.
Hmm.
So again, it looked like we at the right place at the right time. And with what has happened with the pandemic and how it's broken down systems, shaken systems, and also how it has elevated oppression and racism and put it in our face, is revisiting and rebooting and seeing what will tomorrow look like and how we plan for tomorrow and not perpetuate what we've done historically. So
I'm
so
glad
that's
you brought that up, Bill. I really enjoyed your article that I shared with the students called Surviving Racism and COVID-19 in Rural Warren County, North Carolina. And I highly recommend it to all you students to read. It's just actually it was 4 pages. I changed the type size, and it's now
uh-huh.
3 pages, so it looks like less.
Yes.
But it's a great article.
Great.
Really appreciate the way that you looked at all the systemic inequities and how those have really been magnified during this pandemic, but also how you talk about sort of the accentuation, that COVID has had on these kind of two parallel universes of African American or communities of color versus white communities. Can you talk a little bit more about that and kind of where you're coming from with all that?
Okay. Going back to when I was growing up again, I was living in a segregated community where you had black schools, you had white schools. There were certain places that black people didn't go or couldn't go, or you went on certain days. Um, but even with the segregation and Jim Crow laws, black communities were resilient, and we were able to grow our own foods. preserve, take care of ourselves. And due to unfair practices from USDA, many of the black farmers weren't able to get loans to support their farms, like farm equipment and fertilizer. So they had to set up small accounts with local stores, mostly owned by whites, and to get their provision. So as a result of this, many of the young folk left no sooner they graduated. And so when the farmers grew older, they had no one to roll their property onto. So much of the black property was lost. And so now Warren County, again, we don't have convenient supermarkets, and we have to leave the county to buy provisions, and we have to go outside the county for most of that for our food and other necessities of life. Even our health care is situated in surrounding counties. So I attribute this to anytime you hold back any segment of your community, you hold back the whole community. And that's what I try and emphasize is we are connected. And as we see now, anytime any segment of our population is being oppressed, it affects all of us. At the university, part of my work at the UNC is to help lead in courageous conversations where we talk about racism. We talk about resiliency. We talk about courageous conversations, things that aren't comfortable to talk about. But in our work to bring relief to the communities we serve, if we don't talk about these issues, we're just perpetuating racism. If we're not talking about it and actually become anti-racist, we are perpetuating the oppression of certain people. So Warren County is a fine example of that. You can look at its history down to today, and you see what has happened to a wealthy county that's now considered one of the poorest county, and the cause, as far as I'm concerned, is because of racism, oppression.
I'd like to dig into one thing that you mentioned in your article that I just referenced about surviving racism and COVID-19 in a rural environment, and you specifically talk about kind of the perpetuation of a lie that racism creates in terms of separating low-income white people from low-income black people, and that it's sort of a perpetuation of not allowing people to come together around a common issue. And I wonder if you could talk about that, especially in terms of some of your experience in Warren County and how white folks and African Americans and others have come together in some specific way.
Yeah, well, and I think a fine example that what we see now is we talk about the one percenters, where the majority of the wealth is in this country, and that should show us how it's worked. I recall my grandfather on my mother's side, and he owned his own property, but he had to have a relationship with some white men in order to access things. And so that was tragic. You know, as brilliant as he was, he had to have an ally in order to access resource or for protection. Because we know that sometimes when blacks or sometimes we're called elitists or uppity, and it's threatening to some people, and that's why those who want power or riches, that you know how to play the system, keep us fighting among ourselves. Because if we come to the realization that we have much more in common than in difference, we'll begin to work together. And it seems like what we're seeing around the nation, around the world now, is many people coming to the awareness that we have much more in common than in difference. We need to work together and really put our focus on what the true issue is, and that is systemic racism And those who are established or structuring the system are those who want to hold on to power and alienate any challenges to the power.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to hear a little bit of some of your thoughts concerning design of places. Particularly within the context of these students that are listening in today as landscape architecture students. A big part of their education is seeing all those connections, right? It's understanding that context is everything, and that we are all connected to the earth, and we all need to take care of it for our own good, but for the good of everyone else as well. And I'd just like to hear a little bit of some of your thoughts in terms of some of the things that are happening there in your community and maybe other places around community design and people pulling together in that kind of more unified way.
Well, I could go on all day about this, but I would say designs don't happen by chance.
Hmm.
And we have to really look at design and see what it's really saying. And I'll plug this in. Most of us in my community just we're so worried about just existing, we have time to think about the grander scale of things.
Sure.
But those in power, I recall going to Stagville Plantation in Durham County,
Hmm.
and we got plantations in Warren County too. And you'll find on a plantation the master's house set on a hill that overlooked the other slaves' cabinets.
Mm-hmm.
So the master's presence was elevated, and that sent a message.
Sure.
Also, when you go to a courthouse and you've got a Confederate soldier standing in front of the courthouse, that sends a message.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that as we design spaces, we can be intentional or we can be ignorant of the message we're sending.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope from this conversation, anybody who's going forward in landscape or architect or whatever work you do, look at your work through a racial equity lens, an anti-racist lens. What is the message you're sending? I toured downtown Kingston, and there's a lot of gentrification going on, reclaiming communities. But from my understanding, the communities are being reclaimed by people who aren't welcoming other people to those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
But using the history and the legacy of those communities, even in the names, but the very people who own that history and the story aren't welcome to come there.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go forward in creating our spaces, don't perpetuate oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Be understanding that spaces can be inviting to some and not inviting to others. And we found this out in some of the research projects we're doing around the state in rural communities. We come in from the university, we find this ideal meeting spot, and then we want people who've been marginalized over the years to come to this meeting space. And a lot of them were hesitant to do that because of the history of that space.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to say, whoa, wait a minute, we need to understand the history of spaces and places and people. Because the courthouse square, sometimes when we want people to meet there, especially black people, they didn't want to go because that's where historically their ancestors had been and sold, enslaved, or even hanged.
Yeah.
So as we create these spaces, understand the history, try not to perpetuate the oppression, but create spaces that are caring about the history, but also inviting. So understanding that in our work, we can either perpetuate racism and oppression, or we can bring enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Well,
does that make sense?
it does. I love some of your examples about the whole process and being more critically aware of people's experiences, and even just like where you have a meeting is so important. I
Hmm.
wondered if you could talk just a little bit about these difficult conversations, because I think one of the, what our students are the leaders of the future, right? And these are people who are highly educated and who are going to go do amazing things with their life. And one of the things that they're going to need to do is have some difficult conversations in public settings. So I wondered if you had any advice for our students regarding public engagement and how you have some of those difficult conversations in a productive way.
Wow. Well, I think something that was really a blessing to me is I got to attend several workshops facilitated by Racial Equity Institute.
Hmm.
And in my community, I've often heard that the system was designed to work against us. The system won't let us do it. But I never really understood how the system in which we live in has been layered and mantled and designed to oppress certain populations. So I
Hmm.
didn't understand how the system was designed to keep the black man down.
Uh-huh.
So going to these workshops gave me the tools, the skill, the language to be able to understand the system and express it. And hopefully within the work that I do, I can pass on some of these skills to people that I hope to work with.
Great.
Um, so
Could you maybe send me some names and contact information about some folks? I
right.
would love to get in contact with them and see if we could maybe have them as one of our guest speakers for this.
Oh, definitely. So because if you don't understand the system, you'll find yourself perpetuating the system, even when you intended to do well.
Whoa, that's so important, Bill.
Uh-huh. And then at the university, we have our caucuses. We have the African American, we have the White Caucus, where we can talk about things in our groups.
Hmm.
And and then there's a wonderful article that you might want to read. It's called Fragility.
Yes.
Fragility, meaning that black and people of color have built up muscle to sort of like navigate these systems,
Sure.
but some white people haven't. So when you start talking about race, it gets real personal to them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a reason to give up. Feel
Sure.
uncomfortable, but lean into it so you can build up some muscle so you can begin to talk about race. Because
Mm-hmm.
race isn't just a black thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's race is something that has been constructed to keep us fighting among ourselves.
Yeah.
Uh, so these conversations, what we do, we have monthly conversations, and they usually deal with current topics. Last week we talked about the Black Lives Matter signs that we see in yards,
Hmm.
and do they truly mean anything to those people who are placing them in the yards, or is that just a band-aid?
Uh-huh.
So at the end of the conversation, we said we won't make judgments about people because maybe they are actually putting some feet on their behind their signs. But we talk about current issues, and I would hope that through our conversations, that we as individuals we will allow what we learn to help change us. And
Mm-hmm.
as we change ourselves, we don't realize what impact we have on others. But yeah,
Right.
having conversations historically we haven't had in mixed gatherings.
Yeah. 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 That's so critical. Well, this has been beautiful. It's almost 3 o'clock, and I want to be honor your time commitment to all the other wonderful things that you're doing. And Bill Kearney, we're so grateful for your time. Do you have anything you'd like to say in kind of parting to us that we could take with us for the rest of the day?
Well, what I do, I see myself as a servant. I'm a minister, and my prayer is God make me present physically,
Mm,
mentally, spiritually, intellectually. And when I show up, bring a a breath of fresh air and help create a space where people can find themselves and their answers. So I would say if we all take on our work as servants, we're on the right side.
Oh man, amen, brother. You certainly provided some fresh air today. Thank you so much for your time. We're really grateful.
Well, thanks for listening to my story. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
All right.
Okay, we are going to turn our attention to some nuts and bolts of the class now. What did you all think of Bill's presentation and what he had to share with us?
It was nice.
Good.
I could tell he's like real articulate.
What's that?
I could tell he's like real articulate, like by the way he speaks,
Yes.
carries himself.
Is there anything that in particular that stood out to any of you? I have. Go ahead.
Oops. It's really nice to hear the background about just where he came from. I didn't know anything about Warren County, so it was interesting.
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating place, and the things that they've done there have been quite extraordinary. And what I said during our conversation a few minutes ago is it's really true. A lot of folks have come to Warren County to say, "How are you doing this?" And to some degree, it's Bill and other people like Bill who are willing to put themselves out and be, as he said, what do he call himself? T cells, you know, like whatever needs to happen, he can sort of morph himself to talk to the people in various situations in a way that they become empowered. I find that just so inspiring. He's been one of my mentors and heroes over the years since I met him. I would like to go ahead and share my screen with you all, and we don't have to belabor this, but I want to just kind of give you a broad overview of the class in general. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And let's see if I can find what I'm looking for. Yeah, that's it. So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So the short version of this story is Chris Harrison is officially our new program director, and he has been working. I mean, overtime is an understatement. I mean, he's just been working night and day all summer to try and put quite a bit of order to what has been somewhat, I don't know, maybe casual over the years in terms of trying to bring each class into a little bit more focus and make sure that there's some overlap among the various different courses that we're teaching, and also that there's some sense of kind of a logical progression from the very first classes that we take to the very last ones that you all take at the, during your senior year. And it's a work in progress. And one of the things that we've also, especially Chris has been cognizant of, along with Steve, our new faculty member, full-time faculty member, is the need to put a lot of what we do into this larger context of equity and really providing some good opportunities for you all as students to get plugged into the practicing community of landscape architecture in a better way. We don't have the greatest track record in that regard, and so we are in some senses using this moment in history to as a springboard to try and make better connections with the practicing community, and in particular to help you all as students to make those connections with the practicing community. And that shows up in a lot of different ways in a number of different courses, but one of those examples is this course that Chris and Steve have been working on over the summer, even though Steve actually didn't move to North Carolina until fairly recently. They've been working kind of back and forth via Zoom and other things to start to put this together. And to some degree, maybe the time got away from us a little bit on this. So let me just say this whole course, including the syllabus, is a little bit of a work in progress. But several weeks ago, Chris asked if I would please kind of take this on as an assignment to help start to put some meat on the bones and put this into a little bit better organization. So that's what I'll be doing over the next week or so, and just ask you to please bear with us as we kind of go through some of these growing pains. I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm trying to sort of give you an understanding of so many different moving parts were happening all at the same time this summer, as Chris took on all these new assignments, and a lot of things happening around COVID with the university. And I swear every week they changed their mind yet again, and it was no, not, yes, it was this last week, but now it's this kind of thing. So long story short, we're a little bit behind on where we want to be with this, but the general intent of this course is to serve as a survey kind of seminar course where we invite some really good speakers from lots of different parts of our community around the country, and I am actively working on setting a lot of those things up. So even though we don't have like firm commitments from some folks, we have had a bunch of conversations with folks, and our hope to some degree is that these conversations will serve even beyond the university, that they can be something that can be looked at by folks, for instance, around the country who are ASLA members and that kind of thing. So all of those things are kind of in the works as we're going. The short version of all of this is that this class will meet on Tuesdays from 1 until about 3:30, and we'll spend the majority of that time with our guest speakers, and then we'll spend some time in discussion afterwards. And let's see if I can find this. This is kind of how Chris has tried to organize each of our classes, so that 20% of your grade is just basically showing up like you all have done today, and being, participating in the discussion, asking questions, that sort of thing. And then another 20% will be having that kind of interaction through the discussion boards. And I personally, I'm not sure how all that's going to work. The experts who have done a lot more research than I have on teaching online say that this is a good way to do this in lieu of meeting face-to-face in a classroom. The bottom line for me is I'll just be with you. I'm almost 65, and I've decided that I love teaching. That's one of the things that I really enjoy, and I think I'm pretty good at, and I want to keep doing that, but at least for the time being, I'm going to be doing it virtually. So this class will be online, and I want to kind of underscore the fact that you are very welcome to email me anytime and to phone me. You have my phone number, or if you don't, I'll give it to you when I kind of work on this syllabus over the next week. But for the time being, we're going to kind of focus on the lectures and then these discussion boards, and then there'll be a set of assignments that will also be putting together over the next few weeks. So we're a little bit behind on how all that's going to look, but basically there'll be some kind of a midterm, probably a short report, kind of summarizing some of the key things that you've learned from each of our speakers, and putting that into some context within a design situation, and then some kind of a final paper as well. Trying to see if there's anything else here. This is all kind of the standard stuff. Oh, what page is this? Page 7, so it's the last page. This is the schedule that Chris and Steve gave me a week or so ago. Today being just kind of the overview of the course, and then kind of jumping into looking at climate change, and especially how that affects water, water usage, and design with water and so forth. Then we'll look at some sustainability issues for a few weeks. We've got a special presentation on kind of earth biome kinds of issues, leadership. Then we'll take a week off where we'll kind of look at all those things together and talk about them as part of our midterm leading up to your discussion board and your paper. Then we'll look a little bit more at diversity and inclusion, and the specific issues around urban design and community building sorts of issues. And then we'll also look at some of the digital technology and metrics towards the end. So I think we've got a pretty good group of potential speakers lined up. Not everybody, like I said, has committed yet, but I'm actively working on that. And as all of these things fall in place, I'll be sharing new versions of this syllabus probably once a week for the next few weeks until we can kind of put all the pieces in place. Do you all have any questions about any of that? I know it's a little bit vague. Anyone? Okay, well, let's take a quick look then at let's see. Well, I'm trouble figuring out how to get back to the content. Let's see if I can do it this way. Well, I'm having trouble getting back to the learning units, and I know I should be able to figure that out, but for some reason I'm not doing it. So this is what I'll do, since I don't want to keep you, and I'm having trouble figuring out how to show you the learning units. If you all could just take a look at learning units number 1 for this week. There are 3 or 4 different things there that Chris has asked you to do in terms of signing a form and turning in some other things. If you can work on all that, and then also go ahead and get onto the discussion board and share a little summary of your notes from today's presentation. And if there's nothing else that you all want to talk about, or if you unless you have other questions that you'd like to discuss, I think we can finish for the day. Any questions?
Not for me, Paul.
Okay, well, please take a look at the learning unit number 1 and do all the things that Chris is asking you to do there. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week, not at 2 o'clock, but at 1 o'clock from now on, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so wait, so classes from 1 to
3:30,
okay.
depending on how long people want to talk, but I think an hour and a half is usually plenty for most speakers, so we're gonna, what I'll try and do is make it 1 to 3, and it might go over a little bit if necessary, but.
Okay. And as far as the syllabus, is that on Blackboard as well?
Is that what?
Is the syllabus on Blackboard?
It is. It's under learning unit number 1.
Okay.
And like I said, that's a work in progress. And I'm teaching another class this semester, which is a 6-hour studio class. So I've had to spend quite a bit of time figuring all that out. It's a little bit of a puzzle trying to do a studio class online like this. So most of my eggs have been in that basket, but I promise you I will be working on all this week and next, and hopefully over the next week or two, a lot of these pieces will fall in place.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions?
You said that just to post some of the notes today. Do you want us to post it on like a discussion board for this week in Learning Unit 1, or where do you want us to put it?
Yes, on the discussion board. Yeah, that's the purpose of that discussion board, is to just kind of outline some of the key points that you heard from today's presentation.
Is it in the Unit 1 that you want us to put it?
I think there's something, I'm sorry, but for some reason, while I'm in this Collaborate Ultra thing, I'm having trouble getting back to the underlying Blackboard. And so I'm not able to just point that out to you.
Right, because they discussion board and it's just for like introduction for all of us. Like I could, I guess, create a new head, but I'm just not sure what you want.
If you
but I'm saying she does have some.
let me take a look at that, and it may be that I need to create something new for that.
Okay.
If you know how to do it, that'd be great. I'm learning as I go here, so please bear with me as I try and figure out some of this technology. But,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, if you any way that you can figure that out, and then let me know and say, okay, here it is, Mr. Paul. I figured out how to do this. Everybody can do what I'm doing or whatever. That'd be great. And,
Okay.
and I'll look at it when we get off here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all. Appreciate your being with us today, and I hope you got some good things out of Bill's presentation, and I look forward to being with you next week.
Oh, Mama made that. Oh no. I'm talking about the one he got from housing that one day. That pound cake.
Okay. Thank you all.